Hi, everyone. It's Casey from PINECASE. This afternoon, evening, depending on where you are, we are joined with Jody Catherwood. It is such a pleasure. Thank you for finally taking the time and chatting with me. We had a couple of things lined up. You've been sending me all sorts of really great videos, so I'll definitely make sure that those are linked in our conversation afterwards. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Jody. What's going on?
Absolutely. No, I love creation, and I love making videos. I always have. Um, I recently decided to make a YouTube channel just so I have a bit of an outlet to, you know, um, post some of my creations. I'm just doing it for myself, right? But it's nice, even if if I get a response and someone says, even one or two people were like, "Yeah, I really enjoyed your video." That makes it all worth it to me. I don't need a bunch of followers. It's just the act of doing it and creating and sharing and creating connection with, even though it's online or through social media or whatever. It is a form of connection, and I believe in that.
Well, it's really neat because I found your video just kind of scrolling and was kind of brought back to this interesting place. Like when I was going through some of the programs and they're like, oh, put down your feelings or, write, journal or whatever. Like your videos are really, really close to the act of journaling and how intimate your conversations are in your videos. You kind of take those like intimate thoughts and ideas and put them out for everyone to enjoy. So that's really neat. What else inspires you to do those videos?
Thank you. Well, I do believe that a lot of times important stuff gets missed, or people, especially the vulnerable population, or people struggling with addiction issues, people struggling with poverty aren't heard because people aren't willing, or people aren't in the right uh, just in the right they're not in the right level of understanding. They're not on the same uh, level with awareness. And
Right.
I'm kind of rambling, but what I mean is I would just like to increase awareness and try and do my best to put an end to stigma, and make things, especially things that are uncomfortable to talk about, more acceptable to talk about for the societal discussion.
Well,
um,
that's it though, right? Like when we talk about things like addiction or mental health awareness or recovery, like I mean, I can't even get the Facebook algorithm to promote it properly. Like it really is a touchy subject, and so to see like kind of how raw you put that information out there, it's awesome. And I would imagine a lot of people have the same kind of feeling as I did, which is it was easy to connect to because it's exactly how you kind of how those ideas come out of your brain and onto paper. Um, do you think that your like the way that you well tell us a little bit about how you got to the place of like making these videos before I go on into the detail on like what they kind of mean to me and mean to other people. So do you want to let us in on a little bit of the secrets and why ending stigma is so important? Like what brought you to that place?
well, my getting clean for me was extremely difficult.
Hmm.
I got I got addicted to physically addictive, opiates and
Yeah.
benzodiazepines. So I struggled with addiction all my life. I was 15. I spent my high school addicted to morphine.
Right.
So the choices that I made that landed me to be like debilitatingly physically addicted to drugs, I made when I was like not even out of puberty yet. I was still a child. So when I was an adult wanting to get clean, and I wanted to get clean. I'm clean now, but I just mean like as a young adult wanting to get clean, and through my 20s, um, it was so difficult
Excuse me.
to try and honestly go in and talk to healthcare professionals and my family, even, or colleagues, and just tell them what was honestly going on, and that deep down I was genuinely a really good person. who made some poor choices as a child. But it was so hard to do that without being judged as an adult who can't make good decisions, or as an adult who can't take care of himself. Or for the most part, I was treated like someone who just broke into your garage to steal something to sell for drugs. Like, and I found it was like that a lot when dealing with healthcare professionals, or going into like emergency and saying, "Hey, I'm in physical withdrawal and it could be dangerous because I was taking benzodiazepines."
Yeah.
And you're treated quite differently than the way a human being should be treated, in my opinion. Was anyway. Things are changing, but that's how it was when I wanted to get clean at
Yeah.
first for a long time.
I think that for every person that talks about it, obviously it lessens and lessens, but it still remains the same. I seen a girl the other day, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. She was standing in line at the pharmacy to pick up her Suboxone, and her and I were just having like a quick chat or whatever. And I was congratulating her. She had just had a baby. And I was
Wow.
like, congratulations. The baby looked super healthy and great. And not that that's my place to have that opinion, but I was just like, oh, like to me, it was just a mom and a baby standing in a pharmacy. There was nothing more to it. And when the pharmacist came up to ask her what her name was and to get her prescription going, the environment completely changed in that place. Not only is it a healthcare facility, these pharmacists have that training to have a bit of understanding, but it's also a place of just business. I mean, people are there for all sorts of reasons. A lot of people are there for things that have nothing to do with the medical field. So the fact that the energy in that space changed so drastically, it was it was it took my breath away a bit. Um, what ended up happening after she had said what she was there for, and everyone kind of like stopped talking, one of the pharmacist techs came over and started like kind of gawking at the baby. And I realized what was happening was they were kind of checking the baby over to see, if there was any sort of like residual effect. Now, what I know in
Wow.
the job that I have now is there's actual programs where they say that historically the way of dealing with these babies, it's called neonatal absence syndrome, has changed profoundly. They say that connecting with the mom is most important, and that a lot of the time on these OAT medications like Suboxone, it's actually important for the mom to continue to take the medication to actually prevent things like withdrawal symptoms or whichever. So she
Yeah.
was doing what she was supposed to be doing, but the issue was that when you have someone who is battling addiction, who is also then battling stigma, it puts them in a place where they don't want to go and continue with their with their journey. Like, who wants to go pick up their prescription for Suboxone when they're being treated like, you know, shit on the bottom of somebody's shoe, or worse even, because you know what I mean? Now you're, oh my gosh, you're a junkie and a mother. Like, how tacky. And I was like, it's actually stigma that's continually keeping people sick because they don't want to then go and seek these places that are supposed to be, not only a positive experience, but just a professional experience at the very least, So
Yeah.
yeah, I think ending stigma is, I mean, it's a big order, but it's absolutely, it's a life-saving one.
Yeah, well, I mean, and like you said, neonatal abstinence syndrome has changed so much in the last 5 to 10 years. What we understand about, and I won't get into it too much because I'm not a healthcare professional, but
Right.
um, I I can say from personal experience, I know a couple children that were born with the mother being on methadone.
Mhm.
One individual I know, they when the child was conceived, they were still using illicit street opiates
Right.
and went on methadone, and so and did everything they were supposed to. They cleaned up.
Mhm.
They did everything by the doctor's orders.
Yeah.
When the baby was born, the mother was on methadone.
Mhm.
It took a there was a detox process. Um, Nevertheless, so regardless, the baby is healthy. The mother did everything in that they were supposed to do,
Yeah.
and you know there's nothing wrong with that, because so it really saddens me when you say that someone, you said that the atmosphere changed and the mood of the pharmacist changed just because she said she was on Suboxone, because she just
Yeah.
picked that, and that's just terrible. That is absolutely terrible, because
Yeah.
uh yeah, there's so many of us, with addiction being as prominent as it is now. Just because you're addicted to something doesn't mean you aren't engaging in everything else a human being experiences. Pregnancy is one of those things, and
Well, harm reduction as a whole seems to have changed. Like the conversation about just harm reduction as itself. Like when I was growing up, when people talked about things like methadone, um, that was you only took methadone for one reason, and that's because you were an IV heroin addict.
that was
Now,
that was the rumor, yeah.
yeah, like that was it. I mean, there was no other reason. And now people are actually using it as um, a safe
Pain.
way
you
for pain medication. There's, not only is it harm reduction, but it's a multitude of other things that can, promote positive um, community ties, healthy home atmosphere, like all of this stuff. But those things were never associated with it in the beginning. It was only associated as a negative thing. So it's interesting, like how far the culture has come.
It was very taboo. All I was gonna, what I was getting, I just wanted to finish saying, and then it's also important that the baby can gets methadone in the breast milk too, so
That's
that
right.
the baby can slowly wean off of. And it's an unfortunate situation. Nobody likes the idea when you say the fact that the baby is getting any kind of methadone or opiate at all, it just makes puts people on edge. Uh, but we need to be more understanding, and this is an acceptable medical practice, so there's no reason why somebody's negative opinion should have any sway whatsoever in what the general population believes, because the practicing healthcare professionals are saying that this is not just okay, it is the right thing to do. So, oh, I think your mic might have turned off, Kalisha.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah,
That's
and
okay.
it's interesting, like with Suboxone being another one, um, Sublocade being another one. Like, I mean, Sublocade and Suboxone weren't even talked about back then. They were like really new to the market, and so it's funny that now not only we're battling stigma for like these historical practices, but we're also now battling stigma for like some of the new meds that are coming around. So good on you for kind of battling that. I mean, obviously, neonatal absence syndrome is not only for female discussion. That's very much a man's conversation as well. And I think that gets kind of left behind when we talk about parenting. I didn't want to get too much into it, but now that we're on the topic,
Yeah.
for May, we're actually going to be kind of hyper focused on mothers and navigating the addiction and recovery journey. But it actually brings up a really valuable part, which is that parents, the conversation should be actually about parents and not just mothers. Like yeah, the conversation might have to start with mothers a few months back, but ultimately we should be pushing that information for both male and female. Like my project started with men's mental health, and it was because, well, there's a whole aptitude of reasons why, but it was because I just feel like you guys kind of get left behind in these conversations. So it's really impressive to me that you not only know about neonatal absence syndrome, but also have taken some initiative to one, educate yourself, but to be part of the conversation. That's super rad, Jode. Like, yeah, I think there needs to be more not only men like you, but also fathers, right? Because a lot of men go into the situation just trusting that women have done all the right things, or are pushing the fact that they haven't done any of the right things and they're doing all the wrong things, and that comes from just like misinformation. So good on you for being, not only an ally to moms, but you know uh, a good image of fathering. That's really awesome.
Well, thank you, Kalisha. And like it's just, and I believe like it's so important. The women might be doing everything right. Women, especially women, have anything to do with addiction and pregnancy, and
Hmm.
even if they're doing something right, if their partner's not supportive, that could be very detrimental to her practices and her journey. Um,
Yeah,
and on the contrary, a partner or husband or a father who is supportive can make a huge impact
yeah,
on the positive outcome of pregnancy and or someone else's recovery journey too, getting clean together. If that's and that's a lot of decisions. It's a decision that a lot of people make, but
yeah,
I totally believe in being a supportive partner. And when it comes to community too, and this comes to boundaries,
yeah. Thank you for
something
looping that
some,
back. Yeah,
something I think of too is like how can the community set healthy boundaries but also be supportive of people in active addiction? You know, that's a big question, and it has a big complex answer. But part of why I make these videos and why I want to make things easier to talk about is to try and answer that question the best I can.
yeah, exactly. That's great. I think yeah, boundaries both as something that we need to learn how to set, but also like understand why they're set in the first place. And with these programs based around neonatal abstinence syndrome, there it brings a whole plethora of conversations and topics that really need to be sorted out when it comes to like what that should look like. So now they're suggesting things like having kind of everyone involved in the birthing process and everyone involved in the conversation that happens after, and it goes right into like registration. It's always been something that's been done by the female, and now they're really pushing for like the men to be. I mean, and I guess it goes further than just the neonatal abstinent labors. It does go for just like traditional births as well, but I think that it takes having these conversations about boundaries to kind of navigate some of that. So, what is a like a healthy boundary, and not to completely jump away from like neonatal abstinence syndrome. We'll get back to that, but what is a healthy like what is a boundary to you? So when we're talking about that, just so people have something to kind of reference that by, like what does a boundary mean to you, just in
to,
general?
to simplify, I mean,
Yeah,
um, to define what to be firm and define what we are comfortable with and how we would like to be treated by others. To sum it up,
perfect. Yeah,
well, more like,
exactly.
or not just that, but the acts required to define what we're comfortable with and how we would like to be treated by others.
Yeah,
Sort of
absolutely.
guidelines between personal and professional relationships.
Yep. That's another one. And that's the thing, like when fathers are part of the conversation, like you guys need to know that regardless of historical beliefs, that you need to like set those same boundaries. Like when it comes to like
Yes,
expectations or anything like that, like you guys really, it's just as important to have those boundaries set by not only the female but the male as well. And it goes with saying yes, and it goes with saying no, and it goes with saying like these are some of my demands. And I'm sorry to keep bringing up this, like I don't know how much you want to talk about fatherhood, but I'm putting it on you today. So
that's
um
okay. Yeah,
and it comes with like the men also saying like what they're comfortable with in not only a relationship but as dealing with parenting in a whole. Like I think you guys, if not to make it personal, but I think a lot of the time that females kind of just put forth what the expectation is, and it's meant to just comply. But in a healthy relationship, like you were saying, it needs to be both sides having that conversation.
indeed. And boundaries aren't just punitive; they are necessary. They're
Hmm.
necessary um, for health and well being and recovery.
Yeah.
So and men we typically aren't as academic when it comes to setting boundaries, and that's normal. Like I was different, but you know I'm just that's who I am. Um I'm less of a hands-on person, and I'm more emotionally intelligent than I am when it comes to mathematics and stuff like that. So um
Mm.
when it comes to mental health stuff and setting boundaries, I was a better communicator, and I'm not that's not trying to I'm not saying that to be conceited. I just that's just how it was. And so I know that and whether it doesn't matter however the relationship dynamic works, there's typically always going to be someone who's better at setting boundaries than the other, and I think that to help combat that unbalance would just be to open up and help and tell your partner. It's okay to say, hey, you know, we need to talk about boundaries. I think it should be okay for you to be like, hey, babe, or hey, Carl, whatever. This boundary thing seems important. We should talk about this. Tell me how you feel. What are some things that really bug you? and
Yeah.
oh man, and like it's the secret sauce to marital bliss. You know,
Right.
being able to communicate effectively. I just released a video on active listening.
Mm,
Which is a big part about setting boundaries too. Being a good listener, being a conscious listener,
yeah.
setting healthy boundaries. Um, and when if you want to try and understand boundaries a little better, just think about what makes you happy, what makes you comfortable, what's the best thing you can do for you, or what's the best thing you can uh, do for your self care,
Mm,
and communicate those feelings to your partner. For example, you know, if it comes to a time thing, if you need half an hour at 9 o'clock to do whatever you need to do, communicate that. And if your partner isn't able to oblige, then compromise. There's always going to be some compromise with boundary setting. There's compromise in any aspect of any relationship, but the the biggest thing is that it needs to be better understood that it's okay to talk about, and that it's not only a good thing, it's a necessary thing for health and well balanced, and being well balanced, and for a well balanced relationship.
yeah. Do you think boundaries are a challenging thing to put up? Like, do you think that, um, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, no, I'll let you finish. Because
No, no, it's all, I was gonna say, like, do you think that boundaries, like, it's easy for us to talk about it? Well, maybe, maybe it's easy for us to talk about it, or maybe it's easy for us to like speculate on other people's relationships, or, make suggestions. But do you think that boundaries are easy to put in place?
absolutely not. Well, I mean, they can be, but most of the time it's not. It's easier said than done. Um, just like having to let go of an oppressive relationship from someone who you've known for a long time. Getting into relationships, we often know what we want. We often know what we need to do and what we need to let go of. Um, but the act of doing it, and the act of letting go, the act of setting that boundary can be it is the most difficult, and it can be extremely difficult. And a lot of people, I think, I can't speak for women at all. For I can't speak for a lot of people. I can't speak for women at all. But I get the sense that there is some fear there, especially when women have to set a boundary with a partner that they um, fear of, and have some fear of in any sort of way.
Right.
And that's something to take to think about too. Is that you if you have to if you're afraid of setting a boundary, that's not a good thing. So you might need some help, like some professional help with a mental health professional or a counselor. But just the fact that you feel a certain way and you feel that you need to communicate to your partner something, because it's greatly disrupting your emotional health.
Hmm.
That's something that needs to change if you want to get better, if you want to if you want to live in a more peaceful existence. Uh, and I would just say that so you're aware that this boundary needs to be set, you're aware that things need to change. If you are afraid of setting that boundary, then you should get help doing that, whether it be with a parent you trust, or a colleague, or but to be practical, a mental health professional would be the best.
Yeah.
But
So what the suggestion usually is that if if you fear the situation that you're setting boundaries in, then that person in your life, whether it be personal or professional, that relationship needs to be addressed, right? Obviously, that can look a few different ways. Sometimes it's just because the person is naturally shy, and that's acceptable. Obviously, if you have grown up your whole life and being shy is something that not only do you not want to work through, but you're comfortable with being, that's fine. Um, there is ways to set, kind of invisible boundaries and physical boundaries, without being like super invasive or, bombarding the other person down with it. But if it is like a negative thing where you like fear of the situation, then yeah, absolutely. That relationship needs to be addressed. Like, um, why are you feeling scared? Is that relationship even worth the boundaries? Maybe that it needs to be addressed. Like the relationship, if it's causing you that much discomfort, is it something that you can, essentially live without? And if it's something that you can't live without, maybe it's like another, a parent to your child, and you're trying to co-parent to the best ways that you can. Then, maybe looking at setting like physical boundaries is the way to go. Like if invisible boundaries are not enough, then there is physical boundaries that you can make, and that can look like a couple different things. Restraining orders is a physical boundary. Moving spaces is a physical boundary. Maybe looking at, relocating your house. And I say these things as if, you just wave a magic wand and they'll happen, but they are just like, textbook suggestions that would be put
Yeah.
forth, you know.
I felt like I should suggest that because I started talking about the last question you asked, and I started talking, and
Hmm.
then it kind of hit me like, oh, this is a really serious thing. I should probably go a little more in depth with that. But
Yeah.
I hadn't intended on bringing stuff like that up. But it is a major issue, though. And with domestic violence and just living in an uncomfortable household, you shouldn't have to walk around on eggshells. You shouldn't have to live like that.
That's right.
Um, Nobody should have to live like that, and it's not just women. It's I know for me personally, I won't get into it too far, but I lived in an oppressive relationship myself, just because naturally I'm a passive person and I'm a placater and a people pleaser. I was anyway. So
Right.
I felt very it felt like a very hostile environment just for me. Like I wasn't in a physically abusive relationship, but it was very psychologically abusive, and there was
Mhm.
like, experienced some trauma there. So I do understand, and all I can really suggest, because I was able to break free and get out of that, and I'm so much healthier now. I'm making uh, astronomically better relationships with people, and like platonic relationships. I haven't
Of
gone
course. Yeah.
into romantic relationships yet, but just the energy in the relationships that I'm in and the people that I'm surrounding myself with who actually want me to succeed and want to bring out the best in me.
Mm.
And something to be said too is if you're in a relationship where you feel like the person you're with is holding you back and not complimenting your successes and making you feel less than, if you ever feel like that, that's not right. And I'm saying this because I felt like this for a long time. I didn't know that that was a bad thing. I thought that this world that we had created was all okay, and that's just how things are. And I have to accept the fact that I'm not going to grow or get any better as a person. I'm just going to remain, this loser, for lack of a better word, in addiction. Because that's my only options available. But you do have options available. There's always room for growth. There's always room for change, and often at times it's easier than we make it out to be in our heads.
Yeah, I think, and it's important to like address the fact that, it tends to be that, women, these programs are kind of push forth for women. Women are, the ones that kind of deal with abuse. Women are the ones that need to
Primarily.
come up with the solutions. Yeah, women, it's up to them to kind of find some relief and whichever. But the reality is, the percentage of men that are in abusive or just toxic relationships is skyrocketing. And just because the numbers may not like in Statistics Canada might not reflect that. A lot of that is because historically men have had to just kind of suck it up, right? And so they don't kind of participate in any of the census type programs that will put those numbers up high. But the reality is that if you talk to, a friend of yours or a colleague of yours that's male, they're gonna say, like, they, if you ask them, like, chances are they're probably dealing with something, that's reasonably as distressing, or pardon me, as stressing as some of the situations that women deal with. I don't know why
There
that's
was a time,
how
sorry to
we deal
interrupt.
with it. No, go ahead.
There, I'll just say there was a time in my past where I went into a police station because of
Hmm.
I had marks all over my body, and I said that I was being physically abused by somebody
Yeah,
um, in my sleep and in other ways, and
I'm
I
sorry.
was turned away. They basically said, "There's not anything we can help you with. Talk to go talk to like mental health and addictions, right?" So if a woman were to go in and say that that was happening, there would be an investigation. Stuff would start going into motion. Um, so I know from personal experience, if man is in an abusive relationship whatsoever, there are zero supports whatsoever. In fact, they will go out of their way to
Mm.
um, ignore what is happening.
Yeah,
So
and to an extreme, right? Like, I mean, I've actually seen, yeah, to follow up what you're saying, like I've actually seen men, um, pardon me, women go in under the same circumstance, and not only is there an investigation, but even if she is lying, the man is at fault. And so it's,
yeah,
yeah, so the pendulum swings really far on this conversation, because not only are men kind of turned away at the door or expected to suck it up, you're not allowed to cry, and we don't talk about your mental health. But on the flip side of that, women are acknowledged to all of those things, and then to the extreme that they very much can take advantage of that, and it's kind of assumed that if there's any sort of abuse, that it is absolutely coming from a male. And when I talk about this, and I'm not talking about, you know um, gender as a wide variety. It's not that I am not that I don't acknowledge them. I absolutely do. I'm just talking for just in my ignorance and basic frame of reference in male and female situations. Obviously, the topic can be swung all the way around. You know, Gay relationships are no different. They're just as pervy, if not more. To some of these situations, so please don't mistaken the conversation, whether it's spoke by me or Jody. Like these conversations are it's just based on my pure ignorance when I talk about like male and female situations. But that is the 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 easiest way for these conversations to happen in reference. Like, it is really unfortunate that we have to talk about it in any sort of way, or to keep it simple. But yeah, the reality remains the same, that the fact that you're turned away in a situation like that is it's actually disgusting. So you're telling me, like, in your personal experience, that you've actually, first responders whose job is to actually serve and protect, that the response that you've got is like is is that horrendous?
I so I was a mess. Like I was very near death, and all I can say is I was treated like if I could try and explain what was going on in the officer's mind who was taking my statement, he was just thinking, oh, this guy, there. It sounds like there's some truth to what he's saying, but I don't really care, and there's not a lot we can do about it in this society. That's the kind of vibe I was getting from him.
Wow. Oh, wow. I wonder where in the training, for first responders, whether that's like fire, police, or whichever, like where that stigma comes from. Like, do you feel like that's like a taught in like in the household, or is that taught in like their job? Like I wonder where the conversation stops with like humanity, you know what I mean? Like it's got to be a partial opinion. It's not really for me to say, but it seems like it's kind of partial opinion, like
I think
yeah,
it's kind of just the way society is structured.
right.
Um, and it, you know, there is a money aspect to it as well. If we were going to start, like, as a society, as a community, to understand that there are males who experience domestic abuse, whether it be by their partners or their partners' friends or psychosocial
Mhm.
trauma or whatever, then we would should be eligible for like halfway or transition houses too, and
Oh,
that
I
would open up
agree. Yeah.
a whole new structure that we'd have to look at. And I think that there's so many services that we require so badly that are just put off or buried because the people on the top, they're not willing to even consider that as something that we need to divert some money to, which is sad.
It is sad. So, okay, so in your opinion then, and not as a professional, but just as a person, like do you like where does that need to change? Where in the structure does that need to change? Because we have, we do have male only detox beds, but we don't have a ton of transition houses um for people fleeing domestic abuse. Like, okay, so we can talk about why that is an issue, but ultimately, like, what can we do to start making that happen? Like, do you think lobbying government is like where that's gonna change, or do we need to like it's got the conversation started with fundraising and people that are doing outreach, start building these facilities on their own? Like I really do wonder where we need to kind of make our mark, because ultimately, like, I can sit here and say we need to talk about boundaries and we need to talk about relationships and why men need to be more active and verbal about how they feel about their relationships, because that's going to contribute to positive mental health and wellness or whatever. But it's before any of that can even really be talked about, it seems like there's actually kind of some structural, I don't want, it's not even breakdown. It's like there is no structure to it. There is no structure to the male mental health
It
sector
it
in the
really
same way that there's like female structure, is there?
it really needs to start with us. And like, I'm someone who enjoys talking about awkward things and stuff that that makes you uncomfortable to talk about, and it's still one of the hardest things that I will ever talk about. So
Right.
it's going to start, primarily it will start with us, the men who have experienced anything, to actually start talking about this, and not feeling so awkward about having to bring this up. And like, I did not want to have to go in. I did not want to be considered a victim for something like this. And I don't want to have to did not want to have I did not want this to be a part of my life. And I would
Of course.
go out of my way, and I did at the time, and I still go out of my way to even suggest that that was something that happened to me. But I'm talking about it now because I know that the first step is going to be for us to come forward when something like this happens. Because
Right.
if we don't talk about it, if nobody knows about it, no changes are going to be made. So, if you're somebody who is, you know, uh, waking up with bruises all over your body, or you're passing out, and for whatever reason you're being abused by a woman or your woman's friends or whatever, and you're a man, you know talk about it with a counselor, talk about it with somebody, and don't just keep it to yourself, because it's debilitating.
Yeah.
It will deteriorate. And if you got to keep shit like that, sorry for swearing, if you got
No,
to keep
don't
stuff
swear
like
away. It's all good. No, no, no. Like take like let it. It's just me and you, man. Like we're chatting about
yeah.
it. If you need to swear, like say something. I mean, there is programs like John Howard Society you can go to. That program was originally for convicts, actually. And I mean, if you do reach out, pardon me. if you do reach out to some of the programs, like there is some that exist, but you can actually you can email PineCase for you, and we will direct your information to someone in your community. If you let us know which community that you're in, we can connect with some of the places. If you're First Nations, make sure we know that too, and then we can actually locate some of the point people in your band. But if I think of some other outreaches off the top of my head, then I'll definitely include them in the links below to add to the conversation, because I think as important as it is for us to hear the story and the reasons why we need these programs, it also where people can go to find some help, because they do, some of them do exist, but I think stories like yours, Jody, and other people's, the more we talk about them, the more people will know where to find the information they need.
That's my hope. That's all that's all I can hope for, and just keep practicing transparency.
I don't mean to keep stepping off the camera. Honestly,
It's okay.
I hope you don't find it disrespectful. I promise I
Not at
am
all.
practicing active listening. Like, not a lot of people know, but I'm multitasking this evening. So, yeah, I appreciate your patience with me. I keep like stepping away, and I'm like, I don't. I'm really not trying to be disrespectful. I'm all ears for sure, because this topic is important to me. So I think not only do we need more testimonies in these situations and proof that people are being turned away at the ground level, but also more information on where people can go, I think is definitely going to be the place. If I start
Absolutely.
a project that's just based off of men and mental health, would you join me in the conversation when it comes to rallying the maybe local government a little bit and trying to get some of this money swayed in other directions? Like, who do I talk to? Where are all these dudes at? Like, how do I get them out of the woodwork and to join the conversation?
That's a great question. I wish I had an answer for you. I just know that
Hmm.
I'm not the only one, and I know that there's probably a significant number of men out there with stories who should be heard, and that keeping stuff like that in, that turns into anger, man. It turns into resentment. It turns into shame and all sorts of emotions that just ultimately reciprocate back to unhealthy patterns and unhealthy feelings and addiction, even, or how they treat their next partner in their relationship. I took a lot of time. Uh, I know but nobody else would know. But I went through a separation last year, and
Hmm.
I spent a great deal of time in isolation, just focusing on myself and trying to grow
Yeah.
um, mentally, and practice my healthy habits and just be a better person. Because so much of us carry a lot of the issues that we had in our previous relationships into the next one. It's very common, and we need to break that cycle. I feel like that's something that we need to really work on as a culture.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. We do need to work on that as a culture. We also need to practice better listening. So, like, not only do we need to set boundaries, but we need to just practice being, not, it doesn't mean being a friend is one thing, but just being a participant in the conversation that you're having. I mean, I was watching it in one of your videos, and it was like the art of active listening, basically. And it's like, you know, um, yeah, we need to be, producing something with the content of these conversations. Like, I don't know, it brings up a whole bunch of emotion for me, of like, how many times have I sat in a room or near somebody who really just needed to like let that story out. It's really obvious that that situation is a horrendous thing that you went through. It's really obvious that it still creates like a ton of emotion, and all I keep trying to think in my mind is like, how do I fix this, and how do I, but it's not, maybe yeah, I think it's too far ahead of the conversation. Like, the conversation is the solution, right? Um,
Yeah, and I'll
yeah,
say that, like I've seen a therapist, and I actually continue to see a psychotherapeutic yoga
very
counselor.
cool. Wow,
Hmm.
that's neat.
Yeah. Um, Her name's Emily, and if anybody would be interested, anybody on the island interested in something like that, they can contact me, and I'd be happy to give you some information on it.
Wow, without indulging too much, what does that look like? Like that to me, because there is some really progressive, neat ideas happening now when it comes to wellness. And so, what exactly does that look like? Like, if without sharing, obviously, like your own experience, but like, what, yeah, what does that look like?
Well, I think it's different for everybody, but
Okay.
at least with the woman I see, she's and you know, with yoga and the kind of holistic approach, there's always a bit of I want to say like spiritual or
Hmm.
you, higher power aspect to it. So it's more that she's more than just a good listener. She is like a spiritual guide for me, anyways. And I think from most psychotherapeutic yoga counseling services, that's how it is. So
Okay.
it really helps balance the mind, body, and spirit. And
Hmm.
there is some yoga in each lesson, and we meditate. And and if there is something, there's some cognitive behavioral therapy involved too. Um,
Hmm.
but man, I leave there feeling like, I've taken all this emotion I've had built up inside physiologically, and I'm able to kind of get that moving physically, and because it's important to be able to kind of um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like celebrate the synergy between psychology and physiology. And this is a way to do that by combining cognitive behavioral therapy and yoga, and just being around people who genuinely care, like genuinely good, positive people who are natural healers. It's been astronomically uh, good for me.
Very
So
cool.
yeah.
Very, very cool. How did you find that? Like where did you find something so so progressive? I mean, it shouldn't be progressive. These are things we should have been practicing the whole time, obviously. But like, yeah, where does one come across such a program?
So the woman I see in particular, I've actually known for many years,
Hmm.
but we just connected recently over social media. She has some advertising she does over social media, and I've written some testimonials for her because she really does amazing work. Um, but I would say through social media,
Very cool.
and just and having the courage to reach out for something like that too. you know
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and be motivated to want to try, because I've tried all sorts of traditional counseling and therapy, and this works better by far, combining not just a spiritual approach, but
Yeah.
um the getting the body involved, and uh there's it's only so much I can explain about it within the limits of our language, because it's so progressive, like you said, and
Yeah.
holistic and different. But if I would sum it up, I'd just say, because health involves our body's flexibility, diet and eating right. And she's really like, she could be a dietitian as well. Um, she knows a lot about um, foods and what's good for you, and the energies
Mm.
associated with the chakras and that sort of thing. Because at least personally, like for me, when I got clean, spirituality was like, it wasn't just something for me to think of as a higher power. It was everything. It was like I had this, you could almost call it psychosis, because I was so
Wow.
set in what I believed, like that I was making these changes not just for me but for humanity, and to raise up the spirit of the community and the world as a whole. And I had to believe that. I had to have this profound belief that getting clean wasn't just changing um, me and making myself healthier, but it was making an impact on the world around me.
Yeah.
And that is the truth. That is true. It's so true, you know.
Hmm.
It's
Well,
like,
but
sorry.
no, go ahead, please.
So I was just gonna say, like, when I got clean, I was like, and I'm very lucky to be alive. When I got clean at my lowest point, I had been an intravenous user for 10 years. I was on methadone. I'd been on methadone for 10 years. I've been taking benzodiazepines, and other stimulants and stuff. And I was very, very near death when I made the choice to get clean. And I am very lucky to be alive today.
Yeah, I was just like running my that through my mind. I mean, just the fact that you're here with us is seems like a triumph in itself. I mean, I didn't really know much about benzos until detox, and what I learned was that they actually had to change the structure of detox to accommodate the extra days of coming off of benzos. When traditionally they used to use benzos to get people off of opiates, but they can't do that anymore because now it's like one of the
Benzos
main
and the
ingredients.
opiates. Yeah. So
Yeah, there's
like, and
so
when I
much
got clean, this was before benzos were in the dope. I was actually taking a high dose of prescription benzodiazepines as well.
on it. Yeah. And
S-
what's funny, because I don't know why they haven't figured this part out yet, but a lot of the people that are on opiates have a massive prescription for benzos, like
They
massive. I'm like,
so
how
that
the heck did you get that?
they did phase that out, but there was a
Yeah.
time, I'd say like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe six, that I was being prescribed benzodiazepines along with my methadone prescription. And
It's crazy.
the
That's
College of Pharmacists have since phased that out. That's no
yeah,
longer a thing, but it was a thing, especially when I was
yeah.
at my, in the highest point of my active addiction. So
Which is kind of how they figured out, like, for us on the street level, like that's kind of how we figured out that it was safe as a filler. Really, it was just like an kind of an inexpensive buff, right? Like that's kind of how or I would imagine that's kind of how that started, right?
yeah,
Even kind of pre-fentanyl, because I mean, there was the conversations with benzos kind of started before this massive wave of fent and
yeah.
carfent. But that's crazy. So when you detoxed opiates, like were they also comfortable with you detoxing off of benzos as well, or were they just like, oh, you got a prescription for it, so we're just gonna?
I had to go against everything my doctor was telling me. I had to not listen to and I'm not recommending this whatsoever. This is just what
Yeah.
I had to do in my journey, because
Yeah.
it's completely harmful, sometimes fatal and very
Yeah.
dangerous. But I was at a point in my life where my prescriptions were just as involved in my addiction as the street drugs were.
Right.
So I made the choice to stop taking street drugs and stop going to my methadone doctor at the same time.
Oh my gosh, really?
And yeah, and a little bit of it had to do with my crazy beliefs that in order to get better, I had to change, just not just the drugs, and to stop using, but also just be really conscious of my decisions, and whether or not I was doing the right thing for myself.
Yeah.
And I felt so strongly that going and maintaining a prescription, that one that I'd been not using properly for the last 10 years,
Mhm.
was something that I had to get out of my life. So
Yeah.
I spent a good 2 or 3 weeks in really rough shape. I was in the emergency room a couple times, um, but
Hmm.
I refused to. So I quit cold turkey. I was, and I don't recommend this, but
No, you can die from doing that.
you can die. Yes, there it is. At the same time, though, I'm not saying that. Don't let the fear of death stop you from wanting to get clean, because
No.
if it don't let not there not being an available treatment bed for you a reason to not get clean. You could get
Uh-huh.
clean tomorrow if
Yeah.
you wanted to, but just do it with the advice of a doctor. Tell them exactly what you're doing. Because there are medications and there's stuff like gabapentin and stuff can help to keep you from
Yes.
go getting so sick that you could die, or for lack,
Yeah, there
and
is medical detox, in-home medical detox, where, of course, we've all heard the horror stories about detox beds, the list being forever long, and
yeah,
people by the time they, get to the bed off the waiting list, they're either like, 6 feet under, or, aren't considering it anymore. There is a second solution to that, and that is that you can actually talk to your local harm reduction team in Campbell River. I'm not sure who's Dr. Kindy, I think was one of them. Dr. Booth is another one.
yeah.
You can,
The OAT doctors, yeah, most of them.
yeah, exactly. And you can actually do it from home with how to navigate it properly. Obviously, you want to use their times, and instruction. I didn't. I did what you did, and
Yeah,
and precipitated withdrawal is a real thing that I do not wish upon anybody. So yeah, definitely make the right choices when it comes to that. But you're right. You bring up a really good argument, and that is like, don't wait. Like, don't wait to get sober. Don't use other people's reasons or structure to like put off being clean and healthy. Because if you can find that money or that drug or that situation day in and day out, then you can find all sorts of ways to get clean. And sometimes, like, it doesn't necessarily look like what it looks like for the next thing. Sometimes you just got to drive out to the bush and go camping. I don't suggest that, obviously, because you should be near a medical team. But for some people, skinny dipping and just sitting around a campfire is just as relieving as the actual act of going to a Suboxone doctor, going to Walmart 3 times a day to pick up their script. So it is what works for you. I mean, I know people that have come off of opiates by microdosing mushrooms. That's another thing. Like, there is,
yeah.
there is other alternatives. So you're right. Yeah, don't be limited just because the standard says step 1, step 2, step 3. Like, there is other ways around it, for sure.
I
For
just
sure.
had someone ask me what happened to our event. I'm just gonna see if I closed it. Maybe she didn't get an invite from me, but
You know what? Hold on, Joe. Do you want to jump off this and go on to Facebook Live?
sure, let's do that.
Okay.
So, okay.
I'm just I'll just sign off. Thanks to everyone for joining this one. We're gonna hop over to Facebook Live and see how that goes.